Welcome back to a year of Final Fantasy, and we are in the month of Ramu, talking about Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles. Today we're going to talk about Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles Crystal Bearers. This is a lot of crystal in here. Anyway, Crystal Bearers was the last big console game in the Crystal Chronicles branch, and there are two other smaller games that we'll talk about next time. But let's talk a little bit about Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles Crystal Bearers. So as I said, Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles Crystal Bearers, okay, we're just going to call it Crystal Bearers from now on, is the last big game in the Chronicles series. It was released on the Wii in late 2009. Much like the system it released on, Crystal Bearers actually takes some fairly big departures from the series that we know, some of which people may have issues with, though this series isn't really intended to be a review type of series. We're just informative here. Well, we try to be. So with Crystal Bearers, and I guess really the series as a whole, it seems to kind of ping-pong back and forth between the focus of the games. This game actually goes back to the focus on the main character and provides you with a grounded main character similar to, let's say, Ring of Fate. The main focus is on a young man named Lael. This game actually takes some focus away from dungeon crawling in lieu for some open world adventure, and of course with this being a Wii game, they always use the novel controller aspects in various ways. So a little bit about Lael. He has abilities that are basically telekinetic in nature. Essentially, it's a plot point to better integrate the use of the Wii U controller, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. You have abilities like grappling hooks and the ability to throw pretty much anything around the world, which gives you a more sandbox type of an open world approach. Unlike the other games in the series, there are a few stark differences though here in Crystal Bearers that you may not necessarily expect to find. The first is that they're kind of like random battles and they slightly separate you from the world, unlike most of the other games. Enemies can come out during timed battles, and most people seem to be against this, but it's up for you to decide. It's up for you to decide whether it's good or not. So the story itself, well, it's got a little bit of everything. The game clearly took the public kind of view of the Wii to start wanting to appeal to all gamers and even non-gamers. So the game has, pretty much what you would expect with a Final Fantasy game, like battles and things like that. But there are a ton of mini games here. There's stuff like Chocobo Racing, some kind of beach sports, and just a bunch of other mini game subsystem stuff that I figure are intended to attract just a bunch of different types of people. As far as the story itself goes, as said before, you follow Lael, who's a Clavet boy who has special powers dealing with, like I said before, telekinetic, they're really kind of gravity-based powers due to him being what is known as a crystal bearer. Given that he has these powers, you have the classic outcast that people are kind of afraid of. We've all seen this story before, but for Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, it's their first time taking a crack at it, and it's serviceable enough. And in this game, many things hold true about the Crystal Chronicles just in general. All the races that we know have come back, like the Clavets, Selkie, Yoops, Lilties, they're all still present here. The game feels a little bit more in line with the original Crystal Chronicles just as an aesthetic point of view. The game's timeline itself is kind of weird. Most of the stuff that we've been talking about has been a prequel, but this game is definitely a sequel to the original GameCube game. I've actually seen somewhere between 1,000 or possibly 2,000 years. Either way, it's just a really, really long time after the original. And the game feels much more realistic in style, probably due to the darker tones and color palettes of the original game that this one takes so much inspiration from. It kind of feels a lot like Xenoblade Chronicles in that aspect, if you've ever played that game. If you haven't, don't worry about it. So jumping back to a few more departures of Crystal Bearers, there's one thing that's really, really jarring, and it's that this game actually puts multiplayer on the back burner in favor of a more single-playered story approach. To completely be fair, there's no proper multiplayer in the game to actually speak of, so it's not really just on the back burner. It's pretty much wiped out in this particular game. Only a similar Mario Galaxy pseudo multiplayer is present here. Whether that's a good or bad thing is up to you. It's kind of strange also that Crystal Chronicles is known for its awesome multiplayer, but this game just doesn't have that. Magic in the game is also largely gone, and in fact it's the reason for that particular Crystal Bearer title. It's because these people that have these crystals can perform the crazy abilities being magic-like, which again goes towards the "you're different from me, I hate you" story that they've got going on. So all in all, Crystal Bearers is actually a really good game for the Wii. I no longer have a copy myself, but I might have to pick one up again, as researching this has, kind of inspired me to go and want to play it again. This game is very different from the others in the line, but again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Just be aware if you decide to play it and you've played the other games that this one is a vast departure from those. Next time during the month of Ramu, we'll be looking at the last 2 games in the Crystal Chronicles series. Why 2? Well, they're both similar enough to warrant being a single video, and I'll actually get to be able to go to part 2 of the job video that I made at the beginning of this month. So that's super important for our finale of the month of Ramu, which will be Final Fantasy III. Until next time, Crystal Warriors, keep on gaming.